Welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing the second part of the Phoenix Android radio install. Alright, so the radio is in. Unfortunately, I did have a few issues and everything did not go as planned. A few things that went wrong with the install. The first time, the original radio that I got was actually defective. So when I plugged it up, went through everything, it was showing that the auxiliary, which if I press now, I have my phone connected, but if you press it a second time, you'll see it says auxiliary here, auxiliary input. So when it says auxiliary input there, that's where the applications for this radio get the sound. So if you go to the apps list and you have something like YouTube or Waze or anything like that that produces sound to go through your speakers, your auxiliary input has to work for that to work. I did not have a problem with mine, but I did notice that the wiring harness that they sent with the original radio, they looked a little different than the ones that were in the video. So the ones that I had were a gray harness on one side and then a brown harness on the other side, as in it could be used for two different harnesses. So with those harness, I was a little skeptical about using it because it is a dual harness, and that's just what it was. But I went on ahead and plugged the radio up. I wired everything like it was supposed to be. The radio did everything else worked except for that. So all of my heat controls, power controls for the heated and cooled seats, that worked fine. The steering wheel controls worked fine. Everything was fine except for the actual sound coming from the radio. So just to give you all some more insight on how the rest of the install went before I continue, in the glove box here is where I put my USB cables. I put them in the top. Course was caught. So I put my USB cables there because it was easier to run them there instead of the bottom one. I don't keep anything in the top compartment of that glove box, so it made more sense for me to run them there. And my GPS antenna is in the side column there. I put it behind that column to make it a little easier, or make it not visible. Rather, I didn't want to sit it on the steering wheel there and just have it sitting there. The other thing that I had was the steering wheel controls, and for the steering wheel controls, I did take off the column here. When I took the column off, I ran the wiring harness to that controller, or to that plug, and ran it behind, under the dash and behind the radio. So that harness that goes into your steering wheel column is the one that the harness that goes into your steering wheel column is the one that's used to make sure that your steering wheel controls work, as far as still being able to adjust the radio, turn the radio up and down, change channels, modes, and everything else. So back to the issue that I had with the radio. The issue as far as the sound. I called Phoenix Android multiple times to get support for the issue, even though right off the bat I felt like I knew it was a defective radio or the defective harness, because the harness didn't appear to be the same ones that I've seen for this model and for the install video in the model that they have posted as well. So after going through all the troubleshooting, I've reached out to them multiple times. I live on the East Coast. Their office is on the West Coast. So there is a time difference. With that time difference, I did reach out during their hours of operation, of course. And oftentimes I would get someone telling me that they'll give me a call back shortly, or they have to reach out to a senior tech and they'll reach back out to me, which didn't happen. I kept calling. I reached out by Facebook. Message and contacted them as well. And it got to a point to where they weren't responding at one point at all. Like they weren't even responding back to my Facebook messages. So that kind of got a little bit irritating or annoying. But once we finally worked it out, I was able to get somebody, and we went through days of troubleshooting. Like I would go through some things and then they would say, oh, well, let me check on something else, give you a call back. And I get it, because you want to make sure the units work properly before just assuming that they're bad. But the issues that I was having, I don't think that it was to the point where we had to go through all of that. At one point they told me that it was my auxiliary port. So if you don't know, I'm going to show you where the auxiliary cable plugs into in your glove box, or armrest rather. So right there is where it plugs into. There's the part that on that one side you don't plug into anything. On the other side, of course, you plug into your auxiliary input. So I never had an issue with mine before, and the solution after a few days of troubleshooting was that, oh, it's your auxiliary input that's bad. I had tried a new auxiliary cord and still the same thing. The 3.5 millimeter cord, I tried a new one of those and still the same issue. So this would come up. So it would come up and say auxiliary input, as in the input's working, but it just wasn't working. Well, the sound wasn't working. So what I did was I got a new cable, I tried it, still had the same issue. So that's telling me that it's not the port itself or the cable, it's the radio. So the guys said that they wanted a video proving that my auxiliary input worked, because they've had people whose auxiliary port wouldn't work, and that would be the issue of the sound not coming through, which makes sense. So he said I would need to uninstall the radio, take this radio out, put my factory radio back in, so that I could go to media, and in media click on where it says auxiliary, so that it'll say aux input, and prove that it works. By this having the console here, the console button is your factory console interface. What I did was just click on media. When I clicked media, I had the auxiliary option. I plugged up a phone to the auxiliary port in the glove box to the other end, and I was able to play music right from the phone. So that's the video that I recorded with it. If I can, I'll put that video in. So I recorded that video showing that the auxiliary cable worked and the auxiliary port worked. This was all from the Android tablet radio, so I never uninstalled it to show them that video. Doing that proved to them that still the auxiliary cable worked. The only thing that wasn't working was going to the app list, clicking on auxiliary here, still wasn't presenting any sound. That's what you're supposed to go to if you're having trouble with the sound from the applications. So after we did that, they determined that we would need to get on a conference call with the engineers from China, which seems a bit overboard to me. So I just wanted to get my radio working. So I went through the call with them. I was on a video call with one of the technicians, and that technician was on a conference call with the engineer in China. They went through troubleshooting as well, told them to check a few things, and it still wasn't working. So that engineer in China gave the okay that the radio was defective and that the only solution at that point would be to replace the radio. Unfortunately, replacing the radio gives you two options. One option is to take this radio out and ship it back to them. Once they get this radio from you, they'll ship you a new radio out, which means in between that time, you either won't have a radio in your dash, or you just have to go back to your factory radio. Hopefully your factory radio wasn't broken or you didn't sell it or anything like that. I personally did have my factory radio, but I didn't want to keep switching back and forth between uninstalling this radio and going back to the factory radio. You have to remove the clips off of the back of this radio. They're metal clips each time you switch one between the other. Or you could just buy some more clips, but I didn't count on switching the radios back and forth, so I didn't buy any more clips. I was just going to use the original ones that were on the radio to start with. So the other option as far as replacing the radio would be to purchase another radio. With that option, you pay a percentage of the total amount that you paid for the original radio, and then they'll ship you out the new radio to replace the defective model. During that time, once you get the radio, you return the original radio, the defective one, and once they receive it, they'll refund your money for that radio. The option that I chose was the second of the two, so I went ahead and purchased another one at the percentage of the price that I paid for my radio, and I still kept the Android radio in my truck while I was waiting on that one to be shipped. The shipping on these radios, it takes a while. When I ordered the original radio, it took about 3 weeks to get the radio in my hands. So I was expecting that it was going to take about the same amount of time to get the replacement radio or to get the new radio. When I ordered that radio, it looked like the order had went through quickly and it shipped out fairly quick. I guess about the same as the first radio. The hiccup was when it got to customs. My original radio was in customs for 1 day and it went through and was shipped directly to my house. This new radio that was shipped to me was sitting in customs for at least 2 weeks with no type of update or anything. The only thing that you can see in the tracking is that it says packages at customs or something like that, and that's it. I reached out to Phoenix Android to see if there was anything that I could do, anything they could do. Unfortunately, once your package reached customs, there's nothing that they can do, and there's nothing that you can do. You just have to wait it out at that point for it to clear. Phoenix Android said the radios, once they reach customs, they could take from 1 day to 3 weeks, which is a big gap there in time. So yeah, there was nothing else to do. Only thing you can do is to wait it out. So I waited out. I waited for the radio, and when I finally got the radio, I plugged it up, went through my options, and the same thing happened. So the first thing I checked was to see the media, make sure that auxiliary came up to confirm that it was going to be working. But when I went to my applications, I clicked on the app, YouTube I believe I went to, just to see if it would play anything, and I had the same problem. There was no sound coming from the application, So that was a disappointment to me. They provide a speaker, external speaker that you mount behind this radio, and they say just in case your auxiliary doesn't work. I originally mounted that speaker, and the navigation that works is the default navigation that's programmed to that button. I forget what the application's called, but that's the one that normally works. Oh, it's this one right here. It's Here We Go. That navigation works through that external speaker. It sounds pretty poor quality. So when I got this radio, I decided not to plug that speaker up behind the radio, because I don't even want that option. It sounds bad. I'm not going to listen to it, so there's no need for me to plug it up. So like I said, there was no option. There was no sound coming from the application still. At that point, I did the troubleshooting again pretty much myself, because I know everything that we went through. At some point, the auxiliary stopped working. So when I plugged up my radio or came back to it again, I noticed that the auxiliary, when I clicked here, it would just say no media input access or something like that. No media access connected. So that pretty much told me that there was something now wrong with my auxiliary input, which that never happened the first time. So what I did this time was to send the truck to the shop. This was the second time the truck went to the shop, because the first time when I plugged that radio up, another thing I forgot to mention, when I plugged the original radio up with that harness that I thought was the wrong harness to start with anyway, the radio plugged up, it turned on rather for about a few seconds, and then I heard a pop sound and everything went black. The radio went black, the dash went black, everything was all black, and when I turned the truck on, there was still no response. What I ended up doing for that was to send the radio to what I ended up doing was to send the truck to the shop. I sent the truck to the Chevy dealer to have them to fix the issue, because the truck is under manufacturer's warranty. Now, for them to fix the issue, I did remove the Android radio, reinstall the factory radio so that it would be fine. It wouldn't be any type of issues of, oh, there was another install of anything like that. And I got the truck towed to the shop. They fixed it. They kept the truck for about a week and a half, and I do know that they were in contact with GM to get this issue resolved. I did inquire with the service advisor on exactly what the issue was. Unfortunately, she didn't know what the issue was, and the tech that had worked on the truck had left early that day, so we didn't have any more information regarding that. So back to the second time, when the auxiliary input went out, it was this piece here. So that is something that you can put in yourself. However, by the truck being under warranty, once again, I took this radio out. I installed the factory radio back in again, and I was getting ready to take the truck to the shop. Because I had uninstalled and reinstalled this radio so many times at that point, I think I was at wit's end. So I took out everything. I took out the USB cables from the glove box here. I disconnected everything from the steering wheel column, and I took down the GPS antenna from the driver's side column too, because at that point I had just decided that I was going to ship the radio back. With all of the issues that I was having with the radio, I didn't want to keep being bothered with it. So I had took the truck to the shop, and I had them to take a look at it. I was getting some more work done too at the shop, so it wasn't a complete waste just to go there to get the auxiliary port replaced. But what they did end up doing was replace the auxiliary receptacle. So they ran the test, and this plug here was in fact bad at that time. So they went on ahead and replaced it for free under warranty, and they put it back together. Everything was fine. I got my truck back and riding back home with the factory radio in, which cuts about here, and it's like just that part there. It is a touchscreen, however, I definitely missed having the complete touchscreen here. The lights, it does give a better appearance than the factory radio. It feels better, it looks better. So I did start thinking maybe I should give this radio one more chance and try to hook it up again to see if it actually works. So when I got home, the first thing that I did was to plug up a auxiliary cable into the auxiliary port to make sure that the port worked, still with the factory radio installed. Everything worked. So the next day, while I slept on that decision of seeing if I was going to reinstall the radio, the next day I decided to go ahead and put it back in. Reinstall the Android radio to give it one more shot. So I reinstalled the radio, but before completely installing it, what I did was to plug up the harness and everything. I put the radio just right in front and plugged up everything to see if the cable was actually going to work and produce the sound from the applications like it was supposed to. So once I did that, I plugged it up, I went to YouTube, and finally the sound worked. I was able to play videos from YouTube and hear the sound throughout my interior speakers. So I decided to go ahead and install the radio. I rewired everything. So I put the GPS antenna back in the column. I took the steering wheel column apart again and rewired that harness. I put the USB cables in the glove box again and ran all the cables, and then I plugged up the Android radio again. Once I plugged it up, it did work still successfully, and I haven't been having an issue with it as far as the sound itself. So everything's working for the applications with the sound. There are a few other glitches and a few other things that I've noticed with this radio. A couple I have brought up to Phoenix Android, and they could likely resolve those issues with a software update. I don't know if they will. So the install wasn't the worst, but it definitely wasn't the best. And I'm sure a lot of people who get this radio don't have the same experience I have. I can't imagine they do, because they probably wouldn't sell as many of these radios as they do. I'm assuming that they sell quite a bit of these radios. So the install wasn't too bad. The radio is in, everything still works. My steering wheel controls work, the speedometer works. The features on the radio have been working so far. I haven't had an issue. So the install was successful after the second time. I will have the link where you can get this radio from Phoenix Android in the description below of this video, and you can click on it and check them out. And if you decide to buy the radio, check it out. So like I said, the install was successful. Everything's working. Radio, the applications, the internet, everything works through Wi-Fi. So I Wi-Fi this radio through my phone. I'm using the hotspot. So that's how it's connected to Wi-Fi. Haven't had a problem with it so far. Seems to be working well. I will do update videos on how the radio is working so far. So I'll give a review on the radio and how I like it after a few weeks, a month, and so on and so forth. So thanks for tuning in, and if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and click the bell for the bell notification so that you'll know when I've uploaded new videos. And thanks for tuning into my channel. See you next time.